Good morning. Today is Sunday, February 11th, 2024. Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe Lemor. This week's Torah portion, the Parsha of Truma, begins. Hashem says to Moshe, Daber al b'nei Yisrael, v'yechuli Truma, speak to the Jewish people and take gifts. Me'ez kol ish asher yidvenu libo, tikhu es trumasi. From each person, what they are moved to give, you should take this gift. V'zos hatruma asher tikhu mitam. And this is the list of what we need. This is the items necessary to build the Mishkan, the sanctuary. So this is the list of what we need. Zahav, v'chesef, u'nechoshes, gold, silver, and copper. Tcheles, v'argaman, we need purple thread, and we need scarlet wool. V'solah shani, and finely woven wool, v'sheish v'izim, and we need linen, and we need goat's hair. V'oros elim madamim, we need the hide, the skins of rams that are dyed red. V'oros tachashim, we also need the skins of an animal called a tachash. Later in the week, we're going to talk about what this animal was, some kind of animal. And the skins were used to make the covering over the building. Vatzei shitim, and we needed wood, boards, columns of wood that was going to create the structure, the building itself. Shemen lamor, we need oil for lighting, for the menorah, and I lost the place. Shemen lamar, besamim l'shemen hamishcha. We also needed spices for the anointing oil, uliktoras hasamim, and to make the ktoras, the incense that were burned. So we need all kinds of spices. And last, avnei shoham v'avnei miluim le'ifod v'lachoshen. We need precious stones, precious jewels. There were 2 stones that went on the shoulder, one on each side of the Kohen Gadol, and there were 12 other precious stones that went on the Choshen, the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol. So that's the list. Those are the list of things that we need. So ask each person to bring what they are moved to bring. It appears clear that the order of the items is in order of value. We start with gold, and then silver, and then copper, and then cloth, and then skins, and we come down to spices. But the Or HaChaim, classic commentator to the Torah, asks a question, if this is the order of descending value, how do we have the Avnei Shoham and the Avnei Miluim at the end? They were precious gems. They could have been worth more than all the other lists combined, all the other items on the list combined. Why were these precious gems listed out of the order of value? So I'd like to share with you very briefly 2 answers that he gives. One relates to a narrative that we've discussed before. It's else a little bit later in the Torah. And that is that we learn later, and our sages explain, that when this call went out to everyone to donate objects, the Nesiim, the princes of each tribe, held back. They didn't offer immediately. They didn't donate immediately. And they had a very good motive for not doing so, because they said, let the people donate, and we will provide all that is lacking. Now that's an amazing thing, What organization would not love for someone to say, I'm not going to give first, but I will make up the deficit. Whatever you're left over, whatever you need at the end, I'll make it up. I mean, that would be amazing. The problem with that was twofold. Number one, the Torah tells us that the Jewish people themselves were overly generous and there was nothing left for the Nesiim to give. And number two, our sages find fault with the Nesiim, that was not the right approach to take. They should have been the leaders. They should have been the role models. They could have done both. They could have made a gift at the beginning, and they could have also said whatever's left over we'll take care of. But they should have been role models. We go first to show how important this is, and everybody should follow our model. And so, the Nesiim were criticized. And also, the donation of the so the only thing left for them to donate was the Avnei Shohem and the Avnei Miluim. That's the only things that had not yet been donated. So they donated them. That was all that was left. They donated the precious stones. So therefore, the precious stones are listed last in the list of items because it was donated last. It was, in fact, the last thing to be donated, and by placing it there out of the order of value, we subtly remember this lesson of the mistake, maybe well-meaning, but the mistake of the Nesiim, and we remind ourselves that we should not do that. When there's a call for a mitzvah, respond right away. Don't wait to see what other people are going to do. Respond right away. Let other people follow your model. So that's why the precious stones are listed last according to the Or HaChaim. The Or HaChaim gives a second explanation. Where did these gems come from? They're traveling through the desert, remember. I don't believe Cartier had a store, or Burke's had a store where they sold precious gems. Precious gems like this are not normally found in the desert. Where did these precious gems come from? So the Talmud says an amazing thing. The Gemara Masechta Yuma 75a says, Sheyardu lehem liyisrael avonim tovos u'margolios im hamon. The Torah says, the Gemara says, that when the manna fell each day for the people to eat, along with it fell avonim tovos u'margolios, precious stones. And v'hanesiim heviu es avnei hashoam v'avnei miluim. The Nesiim collected these precious stones, and they brought them as the gift to be able to provide for the needs for precious stones in the garments of the Kohen Gadol. But listen to what the Or HaChaim says, because this is such an important lesson. The gems appeared miraculously. Where do they come from? They came from heaven. It was a miracle. All the Nesiim had to do was pick them up from the ground and bring them to be collected for the Mishkan. There was no work to be done. For all the other items that were brought, there was work to be done. The gold had to be fashioned. The cloth, the threads had to be woven. The incense had to be mixed. Yes, the value of the ingredients might be very little, but it took a lot of work. A lot of effort went into it. But the gift that the Nesiim brought, they just picked it off the ground. And we have a principle, which we've discussed before. It's a statement in Pirkei Avos, Lefum Tzara Agra. The value of a mitzvah depends on its level of difficulty. A person does a mitzvah that's very, very easy. Okay, it's a mitzvah. Yes, it's beautiful, fantastic. You'll be rewarded for it. But it doesn't compare to a mitzvah that is difficult, that requires effort, that requires toil, that requires overcoming challenges and detours. It doesn't matter how much it costs. The value of a mitzvah is dependent on how much effort you have to put into it in order to achieve that. And therefore, maybe an evaluator might put the gems and the precious stones at the top of the list in terms of value, but in God's eyes, that donation was at the bottom of the list because it required the least amount of effort. And this principle applies to tzedakah, to giving charity. Two people could give $18 to tzedakah. From an accountant's point of view, they're equal gifts. From God's point of view, they could be very, very different. One person could have truly struggled to be able to donate $18. They had to make a difference. Maybe they had to go without meat on Shabbos. Maybe they had to do without some other necessity in order to be able to afford that tzedakah. For another person, $18, it's not even noticed. It's not missed. In God's eyes, there's a very big difference. And it applies in any kind of act of chesed, any kind of mitzvah at all. I confess I have a shortcoming. I need to work on myself. Sometimes I get a little frustrated. I agree to do a mitzvah. Lots of different kinds. And it ends up taking much, much longer than I thought it was going to take. Just one example it's just kind of, I don't know, to me it gets irritating. I do a mitzvah. I plan to do a mitzvah that requires going to a certain place. And then there's no parking. And I'm driving around, and there's no parking for blocks and blocks and blocks. Driving around, I want to do this mitzvah, but there's no parking. Okay, so recently I've learned in those situations what I ought to do is just take an Uber and not have to worry about my car. Okay, but I don't always remember that, and I can't always predict when that's going to happen. I get a little frustrated. I'm driving around, driving, trying to find a parking space. And, or it could be some other detour. I want to do a mitzvah. And there's some other detour that makes it more difficult, and it takes more time, and it takes more energy than I originally thought it was going to take. It happens to me. Again, it's something that I have to work on for myself. Maybe you have this. Maybe I'm sure you do not have this issue. Maybe I'm the only one. Sometimes I start working on a project, and I think it's going to be a relatively straightforward project. It's going to do something good. And then all of a sudden, unforeseen challenges and difficulties arise, and it becomes a much larger thing, and much more time, and much more energy, and much more difficult to address. And I thought I was getting involved in something relatively simple. And now I find myself in the middle of a quagmire, in the middle of and I don't know which way to turn, and it's complicated, and it's problematic, and it's a little frustrating. I have to get over that. I have to remember this lesson. We should try to remember. When that happens, remember the order in our Torah portion of the gifts that were given. Remember that order. Because what that happens, what that means, is the value of the mitzvah we are doing that becomes more complicated, more difficult. That mitzvah is rising closer to the top of the list in God's eyes. My friends, I wish you a great day, and I look forward to seeing you soon in person.